Okay, hi everybody. This is National Master Dennis Monokroussos, and today we're going to take a look at the latest two games to be revealed in the USCL Game of the Year countdown for their 2007 season. So first we'll take a look at the 9th place winning game, which is between Josh Friedel and Gregory Serper in the Week 9 matchup between San Francisco and Seattle. Alright, so this game, at first I didn't really like it that much, to be honest. But the more I look at it, I have more respect for White's victory. So it wasn't that I didn't really respect it, but it seemed to me more a matter of Serper self-destructing. The more I've looked at it, though, I think it's not quite so simple. So it was really a nice example of chronic weaknesses taking a long time before they really paid off for White, but they did in the end. And this, I think, is really kind of instructive and something for us to keep in mind too when we're pushing pawns around our king. All right, so let's have a look here. So Friedel had White, and we've got the Khan variation of the Sicilian defense. Though it may turn into a Taimanov. Really, it's not a Taimanov because Black doesn't play knight g to e7. So it's a little hard to keep all these things straight. The Khan, the Taimanov, and the Paulsen. I'm inclined to call this either a Khan or maybe a Paulsen, but a Taimanov, I would say that name should be restricted to variations where Black brings the knight from g8 to the e7 square. Okay, so continuing, whatever we call it, we reach this position here, and at this point, Serper played a new move, though it's the character of the play is still, I think, pretty consistent with what had come before. So earlier there had been two games played by the strong young Ukrainian Grandmaster Andrei Volokitin. The first one was played in 2003 against Al-Modiaki, and there he played bishop to b4 and gives up the bishop pair here. And then we had this exchange. So Black made this trade on e4, gave up didn't give up, but exchanged the bishop for the knight, and we had opposite color bishops. And this game, as in the other Volokitin game that we'll take a very quick look at in a moment, was drawn eventually. But in this game, Modiaki had an enduring initiative. Now the problem here for Black is that, of course, his queenside structure is kind of weak. I mean, he's got these split pawns over here, so these are obviously not ideal for Black. And if he tries to castle kingside, well, the problem there is that he's got no defenders. So if the king goes over here, there's no pieces anywhere around here helping him out. So Black came up with the idea of, it's a very provocative idea, but I think probably right, of after c5, queen g4, encouraging White to grab the g-pawn, putting the queen far afield, and opening up the g-file. So now, when White tries to attack on the queen side, he has to worry about his own king. So Volokitin was able to hold the game here, but he was under, I think, still serious pressure in the game. All right, so that was bishop to b4. In a later game, I think he came up with a better idea. This was from a game last year against Zoltan Almashi in Dresden 2007. And then after bishop to b2, he played d4. And so he didn't open up the center this time. So there was no d takes e4. So it leads to a fundamentally different kind of position, and here I think he was a good deal safer. Alright, so White's got a little edge, but it didn't prove to be anything too terribly serious, and Volokitin was able to hold, as I said, with less difficulty than in the previous game, though here too he's a little bit worse, so White's still slightly better. Okay, well now we turn to our game. So this is Friedel Serper, and Serper played bishop to e7. And then here, as in the first Volokitin game, he took on e4 and grabbed the bishop pair. But the difference this time, of course, is that Black has castled kingside. So with this bishop bearing down on the long diagonal, and the possibility of the queen coming to g4, or maybe the rook lifting to g3, at some point, Black is going to have to push some pawn on the king side, and that will create some further weaknesses and long-term problems for the Black king. All right. Additionally, while Black has the bishop pair, And his light square bishop isn't too bad. So once he plays c5, get rid of the arrows here. Once he plays c5, this bishop's going to be very nice, but this bishop on e7 is a less participatory piece. I mean, it can't go to f6 because bishop takes f6 makes black's kingside too open and vulnerable, whereas on d6 it really won't achieve a whole heck of a lot. So I think white has a nice edge here. It's not anything tangible yet, but the point is just that he can more easily direct the play for a long time to come, really, as we'll see. Okay, so black indeed played c5, white played queen of g4, inducing g6, and now it's really a question of what can white do to try to exploit this? And it's nothing right away. This is just a very nice instance of Friedel kind of milking the position for all it's worth. All right, so he starts with queen to h3, which is a good move. The threat is simply to win a pawn with queen to h6, because the only good way to stop the mate threat then will be with f6, and then the e pawn will be hanging. So black played a good move here, a very good move, rook f to d8. So this does two things. So first of all, if queen to h6 now, black simply plays bishop to f8. So that's the most convenient way to handle that mating threat. But there's another try, rook to e3. And so here, let me suggest that you stop the recording and see, first of all, if you can see what white is up to, and then secondly, figure out what black's best way to defend that threat is. Okay? So stop the recording and come back when you're ready. All right, so I'll assume you've done that, and let me first point out the threat. So let's suppose black plays something like c4, which is strategically reasonably attractive. If black were to play in this way, he would get mated very quickly. Queen takes h7 check. So I hope you all saw this idea. It's a well-known tactical trick. King h7, rook h3 check. Black can throw the bishop in the way, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, he's going to have to retreat the king, and then he gets mated with rook to h8, thanks to the bishop on the diagonal. Of course, covering the rook. Okay, so c4 obviously is not acceptable. The only good move here, I think, for black is rook to d5. All right, it's not the only way to stop the threat. Maybe you can play h5, but that's just making the problem even more difficult. But rook to d5 is very good. So it's, in fact, something that black probably wants to play in any case, preparing to double rooks on the d file, in some cases preparing to swing the rook over to h5 or to g5. And the point, of course, is that it stops the mate threat, because if queen takes h7, which is just a blunder, rook h3, black has rook to h5, and the game's over. Okay, so rook to e3, I think, because of that, isn't as strong a move. So white made a very nice move here. He played bishop to e5. Now, the point of this, we'll see it in a moment. And the reason why he had to play it right away, so if he plays rook e3 first, now he can't play bishop to e5. So black's got that square sufficiently covered. And if rook a to e1, trying to prepare bishop to e5 again, well, again, I think after rook to h5, black is in pretty good shape. I mean, the queens are going to come off because there's this threat to h2. So white pretty much has to play queen to g3, and then actually black can even maybe play bishop to d6, right? Make sure I'm counting everything correctly. Well, I mean, even if bishop to e5, white should still be, I mean, black should be okay, but probably the best thing is just queen takes g3. So just get the queens off the board, come back to the d file. Well, okay, not rook to d5 first, rook to d8 first, because a knight to b6, and black should be okay. The bishop pair will be, I think, meaningful in this situation. All right, so going back to the game, bishop b5 right away was a good move, taking control of that square first. And the reason why he wants to take control of it is so that now he has knight to b2, preparing to bring this knight back into play. So very, very nice play by Friedel, good maneuver. And here I think I would say that white has an edge, but this is actually, I think, an important position. Black's pieces all look very nice, Maybe the bishop on e7 doesn't look that great, but I mean it's still doing good defensive duty. It's covering f6, it's covering d6, and but everything else for black looks like it's where it should be. The problem is that black's pieces have pretty much maxed out their potential. It's hard to see where they're going to go from here to do any further, well, to do anything, any damage to white's position. So there's various things that white can do to try to improve his game, but it's less clear what black can do. And in fact, as we'll see, I mean, black really never comes up with any positive idea. He's just always reactive. All right. Well, here I think black had a possible idea that maybe gives him better chances to neutralize white's initiative and his chronic pressure on the kingside dark squares. And that would be f6. All right, now first of all, white can't play bishop to c3 right away, because rook to g5 is just the end of the game. There's going to be a catastrophe on the g2 square. So white plays knight to a5 first, then takes, now bishop to c3. And here black has a choice. You might be inclined to play e5 to both block the e-file and the long diagonal, but the problem is that e-pawn becomes a little bit of a target. So white can play f4, and I think he's got an edge again. So better is just to play queen c6. And white's position is maybe a touch more comfortable, but I really think that black just has everything covered here and should be okay. I mean, I don't know if it's quite equal, but if it's not equal, it's pretty close to equal. Black has control of the d-file. Rook to g5 is always possible, so white can't get too careless because he has to worry about this g2 point. And he can always support the e6 pawn with king f7 if need be, and queen h3 won't be anything because black just plays rook to h5 and then brings the rook right back. So this, I think, would have been Serper's best defensive framework, the best way for him to arrange his pieces to try to neutralize white's pressure. In the game, he played bishop to a8, and this is understandable, avoiding the knight to a5 idea. I mean, this is his best piece, his best minor piece, and it's understandable that he wants to preserve it. But it turns out that giving up the dark-squared bishop, which is going to be the result of this, is perhaps a greater evil. So knight to e3, the rook retreats. If he goes to d2, this is just nothing because of bishop to c3. So he can't maintain that position. All right, so rook here, and now knight to g4. And now black has to worry about white's evil intentions with the f6 square. So this square is beckoning, and knight to h6, frankly, could be too. Also maybe queen f4, where knight to h6 and queen takes f7. Mate is a possibility. There's also the possibility of playing queen to h6. So the bottom line here is that black is suffering from all kinds of problems on these two squares, f6 and h6. All right, so black chose to play f5. If he tries for counterplay with rook to d2, there's a very nice line here. All right, so white might play f3. This is, I think, a good move, with the idea of playing queen to f4, which, of course, he couldn't do right away, because queen to f4 would allow checkmate in one move. Okay, so f3 first, and now if rook to c2, again, this looks all of a sudden pretty decent for black. He's got a pawn. He's ready to play rook d to d2, and it would appear the queen f4 is a little bit risky. So f5. Okay, and now the question for you to work out is whether white can play queen to h6 or not. So the danger of queen to h6, well, no, I'll let you even figure that out too. So go ahead and work that position out, see what you can come up with. Is queen to h6 good? This one's a bit more challenging, certainly more challenging than the last problem. So it might take you a few more minutes to work this out. Okay, well, I'll assume you've given it the old college try, though having taught college, hopefully you've done even more than that. So queen to h6, let's see what happens after rook takes g2. So this is the dangerous line. Of course, white cannot take, because it's checkmate in two moves. Which just goes to show that both sides have issues, as they say, with their respective long diagonals. However, this isn't checkers, and after rook takes g2 check, white can disregard the rook and play king to h1, maintaining his own mating threat. Alright, well now the only move for black is to play bishop to f8, knight f6 check, king f7, queen takes h7 check, bishop to g7. And here, if you stopped your analysis and came to the conclusion that black was winning, or at least in fine shape, that would be understandable, though it would also be incorrect. In fact, white's winning with a very nice move here, rook a to d1. Alright, now the first point to notice about this move is that if black just takes the rook, then queen g8 check, king g7, queen takes g7 check, king d8. Let's see. Yeah, we don't even have to bother with taking the rook. We just play queen f8, and it's mate next move. So queen blocks and queen takes. So rook takes d1 is no good. All right. Well, how about something violent here? So let's take a look at rook takes h2 check. It's kind of an interesting try. And the point is that after king takes h2, white has rook to h8. Oh, sorry, black has rook to h8. Excuse me. Unfortunately for black, not for white, that's really not such a problem. So take the rook, and now rook to d7 check. If black takes the rook, then white's simply up a rook and winning easily. While if king to f8, bishop to d6, doesn't quite force mate, but it wins healthy material here. White's up 2 exchanges and easily winning. Okay, so that's what happens on rook takes h2 after rook a to d1. If he tries rook to h8 straight away, so not rook takes h2 check, but rook to h8 right away, then rook to d7 check is the winning move. The king can't retreat because queen takes g7, so queen takes this check, another nice little shot here. King takes, check, and now we take the rook on g2, and white's up a piece. Black has only one pawn for it, and he's probably not going to be able to keep it either. Okay, so that's another line. So finally, after rook a to d1, I think the most attractive variation starts with queen takes f3. So here black to move, of course, has just an immediate mate. Rook just the rook retreats on the g file is mate. Rook takes h2 followed by queen to g2 mate. Really, rook moves anywhere. The rook from g2 moves anywhere, and it's mate. So white has to have something immediately, and he does. And this is very attractive here. So again, see if you can find this, if you haven't already worked this one out. This is another nice variation. Okay, so the winning move here for white, actually there's 2 winning moves, but the prettiest one is queen to g8 check. The other one is rook to d7 check first. Okay, so takes, rook here, and bishop to d6 mate. So very nice, and it shows the danger that black is in after knight to g4. So for this reason, Serper played f5. White played knight f6 check, takes and takes, rook f8, bishop c3. And, okay, so what we've got here is a situation where we've got the opposite-colored bishops, and here that has nothing to do with drawing potential. It's all about the attack, and you can see that black is hoping for counterplay of his own on the long diagonal. We saw some in that last variation too, but it seems clear that white's attacking prospects are superior to black's. And it's also very nice for white that black has an awful lot of weak pawns too. So this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak. And I would say between those 2 factors, the fact that white's attacking prospects are superior and that black has these weak pawns, it means that white has a very nice nagging edge here. Still, it's not a winning position for white yet. I mean, I would say it's a clear advantage. It's a position where he can just torture black indefinitely, but the win is still quite a ways off. Alright, so Serper played f4. This loosens up his position even a little bit more, but it's the right move. It gives him some space for his pieces, and also, most importantly, prevents white from easily setting up this queen and bishop battery on the long diagonal. Okay, so make some more moves here. Alright, now here white can probably make the exchange on d5, and he'll have some winning chances in this ending. I'm not really sure. I mean, this I think would require some serious work to figure out. So I'm kind of zipping through the moves here just to get to the key position. All right, so is this a win or not? I really don't know. I mean, I think White probably will win a second pawn on well, obviously on Black's king side, since there aren't any other pawns anywhere else for Black. But whether it's a win or not is kind of unclear. So it's obviously White has all the chances, and they're very good winning chances. But whether it's a win or not is uncertain. I mean, perhaps Black can give up one of those pawns, but can create some sort of airtight blockade. I mean, maybe he can play something like h5, f4, and get this bishop on this diagonal. And if he can do that, then perhaps it's going to be an impenetrable blockade. Okay, so you can work that out on your own, have fun with it, but we won't discuss it further here. So instead of heading for an endgame like this, Friedel decided to keep more pieces on the board with the move rook to e1. Okay, so he's hitting the e6 pawn, so Black defends it. Now f3. All right, so the drawback of this move is that it gives up the d file for the moment, because before the queen was covering d1, so he could play rook to d1. So after f3, he can't do that. Sorry, but he's preventing Black from playing f3, and he's closing that diagonal as well. So he gets something out of this too. Okay, Black played queen to d6, queen to h4, bishop c6, and now if White tries queen to h6, Black just plays e5 and has the threat of rook to h5. So it's not really clear that queen h6 is that useful. Black is going to play e5 anyway, so there's no sense giving up the tempi. Okay, White played h3, making luft for his king over on h2, which is a reasonable move. Black played e5 as advertised, queen to f2. All right, now just to look at this position superficially, it might seem like Black is really in very good shape. I mean, you probably won't think that because I've been saying over and over again that Black has these chronic problems, but optically, at least at first glance, it seems like Black is doing well. I mean, all of White's pieces are on the back three ranks. Black has a lot of forces on the fourth and fifth rank. He's got the only open file at the moment. He's got this extra space on the king side, and so on. But in fact, it's really not the case that Black is okay. So Black's pretty far advanced army. The drawback of that is that it actually means that he's got a lot of loose space, especially around his king. So far from giving him some kind of meaningful space advantage, it's more likely the case that he just has a lot of draft to worry about around his king. So space is only useful if you can kind of fill in the gaps behind it, and your opponent can't get into those gaps. But here, White has excellent chances of finding his way in. All right, so let's continue here. We'll see how this works out. Okay, Black plays h5, and this has I think a couple of ideas. One is to play king to h7 at some point, so that way just a little bit more out of the way. But more importantly, to play g5 and g4. So Black would like to try to scrape up some counterplay someday if he can. All right, now White makes kind of a funny-looking move from the standpoint of just the pure optical evaluation of the position. He plays queen to f1. So again, it looks like White's got less and less space. But in fact, this is quite strong, as he's threatening both queen takes a6 and rook to d1, seizing the d file. Black played bishop to b5, and now White plays rook to d1 anyway. So the exchange here would be quite poor for Black, because after bishop takes f1, rook takes d6. The bishop is hanging, the a6 pawn's going to fall, and the g6 pawn's going to fall too, because Black can't keep the a pawn on account of bishop to b5 and a4. Okay, or I don't know if he wants to do that right away. Maybe because then bishop to e6. All right, but I mean the thing is, I mean all of Black's pawns are weak. I mean c5 pawn and d5 pawn is weak, because of rook to d5. This is weak, that's weak. So all right, I'm not sure what exactly the best way to maximize all of this is, because okay, if rook takes g6, then king f7, and okay, maybe rook to d. Well, okay, if rook to d6, king e7. If rook to b6, then there's rook to f6. All right, so what's the best? How do we take this sucker for all we can? All right, maybe just a4 was best. Okay, bishop to e8, rook takes a6, and all right, black still has all these weak pawns. We're maybe threatening to play rook to e6 next, and then take on e5. As I said, this pawn's weak too. We've got this outside passer, so black is definitely losing here, sooner or later. So after rook to d1, black played queen to e7, white plays queen to e1, bishop c6, keeping the queen off of e4. So again, white was threatening to penetrate like this. So you can see, I mean, black has just got all these gaps and holes in his position, and it's just one problem after another. So bishop c6 takes care of that, and now Friedel makes another nice move, bishop to b2. And the idea of this is to let the queen swing into a5, where it hits the c pawn in some cases, hits the a6 pawn, and rook to d8 becomes possible, maybe queen to b6 is possible. So, I mean, you can see, I mean, there's too many gaps. I mean, white is going to bleed in here. So black plays g5, and he's hoping, again, to try to get some kind of counterplay. I mean, if, you know, there's no way in the long run for him to cover all of the weaknesses. So he's got to try to make something happen somewhere, or it's just a slow, lingering, painful death. All right, white played queen to a5, as advertised, and now black plays bishop to b7, but maybe g4 is better. Well, no, I'm sorry, g4 isn't better here. This actually is this is a little too direct. All right, so now white just takes on a6, and black's attack turns out to be significantly slower. So if he just goes crazy with something like g takes h3, queen c6, he's just dead lost after either rook to g5, and then white checks, and follows up with rook to d7 or rook to d8, depending on where the black king goes, or what he does with the check. If he plays queen to g5, then queen e6, and there's all kinds of ways to win. This is one simple way, and white's just up a piece and a pawn or two. King h8, and white gives mate. Okay, so this piece sack with g takes h3 is just not even close. All right, if he plays bishop to b7, that's even worse because of queen g6. White just wins the rook. All right, so that actually is bishop to e8. So he saves the bishop and keeps the g6 square covered. But after white just attacks some things and captures some others, then it turns out that black is too slow. And if Serpent were to try something like e4, which is logical, I mean, he's got nothing else to do, and pushing this pawn could prove dangerous for white if he doesn't have something pretty good here. Unfortunately for black, he does. So bishop to f6 is a very strong move. So queen takes, rook takes. And you can work this out for yourself, but white is going to win big material very quickly. So he's going to win a queen for a rook, or else give mate here very soon. So white wins in this position. Okay, so going back to the game, that just shows that black doesn't have time for g4 just yet. So instead, Serper held on to all of his goodies here with bishop to b7. Now queen to a4. So a new threat. Now there's rook to d7. So black plays queen to f7, queen c4. Okay, now we've got yet another threat, rook to e1, and we win this pawn. So black played king to h7 to get his king off of this pin, so that way on rook to e1 he can play rook to f5. However, he missed something. So again, this is an easy one. Stop the recording here and see if you can figure out what white could have done here and should have done. Okay, the answer, simply bishop takes e5, because if queen takes e5, queen f7 wins everything. Okay, instead he missed this. He played more subtly, let's say, with rook to d8. And this is certainly a good move too. And we can jokingly say that it has the threat of bishop takes e5 as well. All right, so here queen takes d8 is of course no good, because white grabs the bishop, and black doesn't have any kind of perpetual check here, so he's hoping for this, queen g3, queen e1 forever, but white just plays queen to e4, and that's the end of that. Okay, so black played king to g7, and now we just keep milking here. Queen to d3, which threatens rook to d6, and then big problems with the g6 square. And if black tries to stop that with rook to f6, either now or on the very next move, then rook to d7 happens, and that's also fatal. However, I think black could surprisingly have gotten away with g4 here. So takes, takes, and now if rook to d6, black can actually play g takes f3. While if f takes g4, there's kind of an interesting echo of the bishop takes e5 tactic that was missed earlier, right? So we go back to here. White had bishop takes e5, where if the bishop's captured, the rook falls. Well, we have the same thing here, where black can play bishop to e4. Unfortunately, this one's not so bad for white. So he takes, queen e5, and black can still defend this. I mean, white, is probably winning in the long run, but it's not 100% clear. I mean, I would say it's, practically speaking, we can only say it's a clear advantage. I mean, there's still some real problems for white to solve before he can bring in the full point. So I think g4 would have been a good move. But, okay, he has, I think, more chances for this later, but still it would have been an attempt to throw a bit of a monkey wrench into the works to invent a brand new phrase that no one's ever used before. All right, so bishop to c6 is the move that was played. And here rook to d6 is met by... Actually, what's wrong with rook to d6 here? Oh, yeah, rook to f6, right? That was the basic point, sorry. Yeah, so rook to d6, rook to f6. So that's why he plays bishop to c6. There's no rook to d7 here. Okay, so so white played rook to c8, getting the rook where it's no longer loose and attacking the bishop. And here, if bishop to c6, white can grab the a6 pawn pretty safely. And queen to d6, going for a counterattack, is of no avail because of queen to c8, when black will get mated if he tries to go perpetual check hunting. Okay, so black played queen to c7, and now rook to d8 is quite strong. So it's like he gained a tempo out of this. But black found a resourceful move here, so he played c4. And this is a very good move. First of all, white can't capture the pawn because the queen to b6 check, and the bishop on b2 is hanging. So he plays queen to d2, but now white doesn't have access to the g6 square with his queen anymore. So takes, takes, g4. So again, this is better than dying without a fight. But now rook to e8 happens. Okay, so here I think black should have played rook to e7, though he was still okay with his move, so he had one last chance after this. So rook e7, takes, takes. Okay, here queen to f4 is all right, but it's okay. It's not completely clear. I believe black can play. I'm trying to remember. I think just play g takes h3 or g takes f3. Maybe g f3 is slightly more accurate. I'm not sure. So white takes. Bring the king. I don't know. Try g6. Okay, and then yeah, because then we have queen g5 check, and so this isn't entirely clear either. Or even probably bishop takes f3, and this may just transpose into the variation that I'm going to consider in a moment. Okay, so queen takes f4 is not so special, and if f takes g4, king h6 is very good. So we get out of the way of that pin on the long diagonal. Takes, takes, queen a5, bishop e4. And in this ending, again, it's a little bit complicated. Is this a win or a draw? I'm pretty sure that this should be a win because white's passers are pretty far separated here. So, probably start with the move b4, and I think white is winning this ending. But there may be some small chances for black to hold this. All right. Oops. In the game, rook to e8, queen c5 check happened, king h1, and now black should have played rook to e7. Had to play it. And this would transpose the lines we were just looking at. And this one, I think, is probably winning for white. But this position, this queen ending here, I think, well, I'm certainly not willing to say that this is a win for white yet. So black's in pretty good shape here because white's king is really exposed. Now maybe he can maneuver his king to the queen side without losing his h-pawn or having any problems over there, but I'm not sure that he can. I mean, so that's really the key question. So I suspect with perfect play, this is probably a draw. The players were probably both in time pressure, so who knows, anything could have happened here. But this, I think, is definitely a good chance for black. Definitely the best that he could have gotten. All right, in the game he played g takes f3, and now the game just ends pretty much right away. So bishop takes pawn, and now white just infiltrates completely. Check again, and now black resigned. Because after queen to e7, or rook e7, it doesn't really matter. We'll end up with the same kind of idea. This is mate. So a nice game by Josh Friedel. Probably not, he probably wasn't winning until fairly late, but it was the kind of position where the pressure on Serper is just too much to withstand. I mean, there's just one threat after another. We saw all these different places where white was threatening to penetrate, and black has to perfectly defend against all of this without allowing any tactical errors to creep in. And so even a player as strong as Serper, who's a very good grandmaster, very experienced player, he was able to defend pretty successfully for a long time, but without ever really gaining ground either. I mean, that was another problem. There was no way for him to resolve the position into something that was nice and safe. So he just had to keep trying to meet threats as best as he could, and it proved to be too much in the end. Okay, so that was that game. Now let's turn to the 8th place finishing game between Lev Millman, who played for the Carolina team, and Ron Burnett of Tennessee. Okay, so this is actually a very nice game. Let me flip this here since black won it. And I think this is one of my favorite games of the year. Certainly it creates a very strong visual impression. Okay, so Millman plays this, and we have the Pierts, one of Burnett's favorites. Okay, so we've got the classical here, the old-fashioned main line. Well, it's the old-fashioned main line if white plays bishop to e2 here. But Millman played the more popular nowadays bishop to e3. Burnett played a6, which is also a popular approach. And here, I would prefer a4, which is also the main line. And then after b6, white can play the bishop anywhere he wants to, either to d3, e2, or c4. I guess you could go to b5 or a6. It's legal, but not really advisable. But any of these other three bishop moves would be perfectly fine. All right, in the game he played bishop to d3. Not necessarily bad, but again, I think it's better to play a4 for a couple of reasons. I mean, so one is that you're preventing black from engaging in this queenside expansion with b5. But the second reason why I think it's to be preferred is that it's also a useful waiting move to see what exactly black does with his queenside. So is he going to play knight to c6, knight b to d7? Will he commit the bishop? What's he going to do? All right, so bishop to d3 is not especially flexible. Okay, Burnett played knight to c6, which gives him the option of playing knight to b4 in some positions, especially if white were to play a4 now. So Millman played d5. And even here, knight to b4 can be played, but it's a little awkward maybe, because if the bishop retreats, then black has to spend a tempo on a5. So let me demonstrate here. Okay, so if bishop to e2, black has to play a5, so that way on a3, the knight can retreat to a6. All right, so that's not a bad way to play. It's playable. It's been played before, but Burnett's knight to e5 was a very interesting move as well. Okay, now I think the only game that had reached this position previously was between Godena and Manka from a tournament in Cremona in 2006. And there, white played bishop to e2, and looks to me like black is just getting very comfortable play here. All right, so at best, white has a microscopic edge, but really I think it's pretty close to even here, and black held without much trouble against his higher rated opponent. Okay, so instead, Millman tried knight takes e5 straight away. So de, queen f3, e6, and in the next two moves, Millman basically loses the game. So I think the safest way to play here is just to castle short, and it's somewhere, it's somewhere in that fuzzy region between equality and a small edge for white. Instead, he castled long, which is, it puts the rook on d1 right away, which is a nice thing. But as we'll see, it's not really clear that white's attacking prospects are that great, and black has attacking chances of his own on the queen side. Okay, well, Burnett took on d5, and here white has a choice between which way he should recapture on d5. If knight takes d5, then knight takes, and here if e takes d5, f5 I think gives black pretty good play. So the safer way to go is bishop to c4, taking advantage of this pin on the d file. And after queen f6, takes. Again, I think this is somewhere in that region between equals and a little bit better for white. So his bishops are just more active. It's a little ahead in development here. And if black plays something like c6 to kick away the white bishop, then white's bishop, kick away the light squared bishop, white's dark squared bishop may avenge his fellow clergyman by landing on b6 at some point in the near future. Okay, so knight takes d5 I think is reasonably promising, and e takes d5 is also playable as well. Unfortunately, Millman chose door number 3 with bishop to c5, and okay, this looks like it's a tempo gainer at first sight. You hit the rook, and then you recapture on d5 at your leisure. The problem is that black has a very good move d4, and at this point, I think it's not too early to say that white is strategically lost, believe it or not. So the rest of the game is kind of an unfolding of the tremendous potential that's in black's position right now. All right, so white has to take, black recaptures, and let's take quick stock here. Black is only down the exchange for a pawn, so it's a minuscule material disadvantage, somewhere between half a pawn and a pawn, depending on how you like to count the value of the pieces. And more to the point, he's got the bishop pair, and he's got a great center, and it's only going to grow. And on the queen side, these pawns are just going to roll down the board and eventually decapitate white's monarch. And it's very difficult to see what white can even do about this. Black's game just plays itself. Okay, now he could try knight to e2 here. This is kind of miserable, but it's a different kind of misery than what he chooses in the game. But still, black just plays bishop to e6, and then c5, c4 is coming, and white's position is horrible. So white chose a different kind of horror with knight to d5. So this makes c5 a little tougher to execute, but now black has f5. So he gave up one bishop pawn for another. So e4 is threatened, and just a horrible position here for white. Okay, played bishop to c4, getting out of the way of e4 and threatening a discovery, so black just blockades it. Bishop to b3, just retreating in advance of the inevitable b5. And now white plays g4. So he's hoping to open some lines on the king side, but he's just way behind the race. Okay, a5, threatening to simply trap the bishop with a4. So a3, rook to b8, queen g3. Again, I guess hoping to play g takes f5 and open the g file, though after g takes f5, black will play bishop takes f5. So it looks like just a dead end. a4, bishop a2, b4. All right, so now black has to, or white has to worry about b3 possibilities, as well as b takes a3 possibilities, and yeah, this is disastrous. And b3 is a threat already, because even though white's got 3 pieces on it, so he's got the c-pawn, the bishop, and the queen. Whoops. The bishop and the queen. Black can throw in this little Zwischenzug with queen takes d5 before recapturing. So in other words, let me just go ahead and enter this. b3 takes, queen takes d5. And if king to c2, okay, that's not going to help anything, so we just play bishop to e6. And of course, you can't move or capture with the b-pawn because of queen takes a2. If white tries g takes f5, again, praying for some open lines, bishop h6 check is a nice little Zwischenzug. Now bishop takes f5, and b3, or again, b takes a3, is just comic. This bishop on a2 is not only completely shut out of the game, but going to be lost. So white chose g5, and while this is a complete admission of failure for all of his kingside hopes, it does keep the bishop on g7 and the bishop from c8 temporarily out of the game. I mean, as opposed to what we saw here, where they're both operating magnificently. Okay, so g5, and the entombment idea now takes place. b3. If c takes b3, again, queen takes d5. So bishop to b1, queen d5 anyway. And, I mean, this is just really hilarious. And, I suppose if black wanted to, if nothing happened between now and then, he could just push this c-pawn, as far as he wanted to. I mean, it's ridiculous. The bishop goes to a6 or e6, puts a big piece on the c-file, and, he can win pretty much however he wants to. All right, so white played c3, hoping that this bishop from b1 can, again, find its way back into the game. Black could play c5 here, but he decided on a different and very nice move. He played rook to b6. So this, of course, strongly dissuades white from playing c takes d4 on account of rook to c6 check. So white played h4, hoping, I don't know what for, but you got to make moves. Okay, now e4 happened, and white didn't take on c7, because if he takes on c7, then rook c6 is not good. So he played rook h to e1, black played queen to c5, white played f3. Now, this is, very provocative, but, the thing is, he can't really protect the c-pawn anymore anyway. So white's got three guys attacking it. Black's only got 2 defenders, white has only 2 defenders, but there's no good third defender for it. I mean, the rooks are both prevented from getting there, and king to d2 would, if nothing else, walk into e3, or maybe dc and then rook d6 check. So it's all bad all the time here. Or even bishop to e5. So I mean, there's just a plethora of devastating options here. So bishop to e5 is horrifying, and everything else is even worse for white. Okay, so he played f3. Can't defend the c-pawn anyway. Might as well go for some counterplay. All right, so here, again, stop the recording. See if you can figure out what the best way for black to finish the job is. So white is in desperate trouble, but still got to win the game. So how do we do it? Okay, so welcome back. I assume you've all worked it out. And the answer that Burnett chose was d takes c3, which is very nice. All right, it's obvious, though. So what makes it nice? Well, it's that he's giving up some material here, and also by the rooks moving from d1 to d8 and then to c8, it does a couple things. So first of all, it gives the white king a flight square on d1. And second, not only has white grabbed some material, he even has a threat, rook takes c7, or queen takes c7, both of which would be very harmful to black's health, should they be allowed. So here again, you might wonder, well, what does black have? I mean, you can play c takes b2 check, but if we do that, the king is just going to run away here. So king to d1, and if we follow the old adage, posture sees a check, gives a check, all we've done is chase the white king to safety. So this would be a very, very poor way to continue our attack. So here Burnett made a very nice move, and this of course had to be foreseen when he played d takes e3, and it's rook to d6. So first of all, this cuts off the communication of the queen, white's queen, to c7, and secondly, it's putting a barrier against white's king escaping to the d file. Alright, so here c takes b2 is just mate in 1 if it's allowed. So Millman chose bishop takes e4, again giving his king a flight square. So before he tried to give his king the d1 square as a route of escape, now he's giving himself b1 as a way out. Alright, so once again, let me invite you to stop the recording and figure out what Burnett came up with at this point. So Burnett's doing the best he can to put up some resistance, and once again Burnett is forced to find some way to make the attack go. I mean, he could probably take the bishop, but let's see if we can find something a little bit more incisive, something more forceful and direct. Okay, well, the move that Burnett chose was queen to e3. Absolutely beautiful move. Wonderful way to finish this game, which was, strategically complete and tactically, I think, pretty much flawless. I mean, there are some places where, there were kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another sorts of alternatives, but I don't think he missed anything that was clearly better. And it's just been a very lovely game, and this is a beautiful way to finish it. Alright, so what's the idea of this? Well, first of all, let's start with the less forcing move. Okay, if king to b1, then we just play c2 check, and if king to a1, we just queen, and don't forget that bishop on g7, that's mate. Okay, we're after c2. If white tries bishop takes c2, then takes. Well, if king to c takes c2, then we just give mate this way. Again, the bishop on g7 is playing its important role. So notice all 3 of black's pieces are crucial in this, and really the pawns too. If white tries king to a2, then queen to b3 check, and now, of course, he's got a choice of mates, but queen takes a3 is a nice one. And that would have been the result had white chosen king to a1 as well. So king to a1, queen takes a3 is mate. Alright, but let's go back to the beginning here. If queen to e3, why not just take it? Well, this one is, I think, simple, but again, very elegant. Rook to d1 mate. So, terrific game by Burnett. I was a little disappointed that it only came in 8th place. I think I voted it 6th in my judging. But, the only thing that prevents it from really getting a higher score is that Millman played pretty poorly, and white's position was really, as I said, and strategically deep doo-doo after d4. So this is just such a tough position for white. And again, so straightforward for black that it's prevents it from getting a higher rank. But still, Burnett did very well with what he was faced with and played a beautiful game. So I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the show, and hope you enjoy the stuff that's on my blog. So we got to have our little segue there. So check that out, chessmind.powerblogs.com, chessmind.powerblogs.com. Anyway, thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week with another Masters lesson show. And then in 2 weeks, I'll have a USCL show covering the 6th and 7th place finishing games. So thanks a lot, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.